Hello everybody, welcome to Brainy Films. We started this series with a documentary, and we're going to end with a documentary. This one is called Do Not Resist, a young filmmaker, Craig Atkinson, and this one is a shocker.
We are seeing a growing debate about so-called warrior cops, a term that I've heard, and the militarization of police. I think it's very important to remind our fellow citizens that we need a range of weapons and equipment to respond and protect our fellow citizens and protect ourselves. Threat!
The thinking about a documentary like this is so loaded with philosophical thought and angst that what we need to do is really examine it one question at a time. This is made by a young filmmaker, Craig Atkinson. He made it between the years 2013 and 2016. I'm talking about 3 years of filming, schlepping all over the United States. It wasn't just filmed in one city at all. So it took 3 years. He gained access to behind-the-scenes local police activity because his father was a member of a SWAT team and another relative. And they said, "We will get you in there. You can bring your cameras in." But he made them a solemn promise that he would edit the film and he would have control of the final cut.
It's clear. There's gotta be some drugs here.
We need to put the brakes on the fear, and we need to act rationally. Terrorism works because it makes people irrational, and it makes them destroy themselves.
Craig, thanks so much for being here.
My pleasure. Thanks for having us.
Yeah, congratulations. I love your movie.
Thank you.
And I don't just love your movie because of what it's about and the statement that I might make. I love your movie because I think formally it was daring the way that you approached it, in the sense that there isn't a main character. There isn't a sort of driving story. The story is the different ways the policing has changed in America. And you go from place to place, sort of different elements, to just show the facts about it. You clearly didn't want to seem partisan in any way. Can you talk about your decisions behind this?
Sure. It was largely due to the fact that we started a year before Ferguson, and when we started looking at police issues, the jump-off point for me was the Boston Marathon bombing, and I witnessed it was the first time that we saw the heavy armament with domestic police forces. I also noticed that the mentality had shifted, and it was more of an occupying force mentality versus a protect and serve. And what I was comparing this to was my own personal history, because my father was a police officer for 29 years outside of Detroit, and a SWAT officer for 13 of those years. And so I kind of grew up with the war on drugs era of policing, and dinner conversations, and just kind of in the background of my mind. So when I observed the Boston Marathon bombing, I just thought this was a complete departure from sort of like my father's era of SWAT. And so when we're pitching this idea around that we're going to do a story like this, this is a year before the events in Ferguson, so people didn't have too much of a context for this type of conversation. They didn't know what I was talking about. So
Militarization of police wasn't a headline.
It wasn't even a headline yet. So we thought that instead of talking heads and experts would only, put forth one point of view, and it might not be accurate at all. I said, what if we got the cameras into these environments where we could actually observe what domestic, police were actually doing, and to, not glorify the police officers and not condemn the people that were suspects, but, get into the space and neutrally observe these scenes are unfolding. And I think that's what people are responding to. They said, thank you so much for not bashing the cops, but clearly showing areas where we need to improve. And so I'm happy we were able to strike that balance.
The critical reaction was excellent. I mean, really good. First showing was at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York, and it won for Best Documentary. It received prize money, and that is crucial as we go on with the story about how this film actually got released to the public. So it won, and it won $20,000. The film is looking into this new, and to me it was shocking, reality that the federal government is now selling military weapons, passing it on to local law enforcement. And we are talking about all sorts of things: grenades, tanks, all sorts of armored cars, all sorts of weaponry that prior to this had never been used by local law enforcement and now is in standard practice. I want to read to you from an article by Jason Guerrasio, InsideBusiness.com, that ran a very long interview with Craig Atkinson and gave incredible background material about the release of this film and what happened with it. 3 years ago, amid the protests erupting in the streets of Ferguson, Missouri, we all remember that, I think, President Barack Obama ordered a review of a federal program allowing military equipment to be transferred from the armed forces to state and local police. For many, the images of local police dressed in camouflage and traveling in armored vehicles became a metaphor for the ways in which the lines had blurred. And the journalist Radley Balco has referred to this as the rise of the warrior cop. It really is stunning. The review resulted in an executive order, this is by Obama, that curtailed the transfer of some types of military equipment. A new short film by Craig Atkinson. This is the director who made the film that we're going to see. He took this material out and has now released it as a short film. So this is material not seen anywhere else. He's recently released this as a short film, and it is called Conditioned Response, which includes unreleased footage that he shot while he was doing his documentary. And that was Do Not Resist in 2016. This suggests that the armored vehicles rolling through Ferguson between civilian law enforcement and the military were only the most visible indicators of this militarization. Another, more subtle and perhaps more intractable form of it is affecting the psychology of the officers themselves. So watch this.
Once you've made the decision to take a human life, you're a transformed creature, you're a predator. What does a predator do? They kill. Only a killer can hunt a killer. Are you emotionally, spiritually, psychologically prepared to snuff out a human life in defense of innocent lives? If you can't make that decision, you need to find another job.
Shots fired! 321, we have shots fired. We have one suspect down.
I told him not to reach for it. I told him to get his hand out.
You told him to get his ID, sir, and his driver's license.
Have your license, please.
Get out of the car! Get out of the car! Why did you shoot me?
Well, you dove head first back into your car. Your seatbelt violation, sir.
Seatbelt? I just pulled it off right there at the corner to pull in the gas station.
Well, I got help come to you, okay? I got help come to you.
I'm sorry.
Whenever we survey cops about use of deadly force, they consistently tell us that number one concern is what? Begins with an L. Lawsuits, liability, lawyers, I'm going to get sued. Do you understand you can be sued for not shooting? Stand there and do nothing while people are murdered. What do they call that? cowardice, malfeasance, dereliction of duty, deliberate indifference, blood on your hands. We might call it assisted suicide, because the one that dies next might be you, yes? There's only one way out. Know the law, know it well. Get every training opportunity you can. Don't be afraid of being sued. Everybody gets sued. Just a chance for overtime. Be afraid of being successfully sued. Ecclesiastes 3:3. Time to kill, time to heal. Appreciate you, brother. Good to have you on board. Stay hard. Hurrah.
Excellent. Thank you very much.
Proud to be a serviceman. Stay hard.
The prize money became crucial, and this is because of Netflix. This business article to which I have referred you certainly educated me about this whole business, and it's a little bit dirty, of buying these films and the distribution. So we have the young filmmaker, Craig Atkinson, all excited. 3 years working on this. And he takes it to Tribeca, where it's a big deal to get your film accepted. He's young. He's not represented by lawyers. He doesn't know anything, but the hype, the talk around Tribeca, the festival, is that this is a great documentary. So Netflix comes to him before the film is ever shown. They've heard, and so they kind of want to scoot in and buy it up cheap. And they say, oh, this young kid, he doesn't know. So they offered him, it is said, in the 3 figures. Needless to say, Craig Atkinson was wildly excited. But remember what we spoke about before. He had promised his father that he would do the editing. He went back to Netflix. He said, okay, I want to hear your deal. Just, are there conditions? And Netflix slyly said, well, conditions, yes. We get the final edit, we get the final cut. And so, of course, he didn't know what to say because he knew he could never do that. Went back and forth. He didn't have a lawyer to represent him. They, apparently, Netflix, who is the powerhouse in streaming now, and we all now know how many platforms there are that are streaming films. Netflix, I guess, is number 1. He went back to them. He thought about it. He decided that, obviously, he just could not do that. He had given his word. He'd put 3 years into this. He believed in his film, and he wasn't going to give it to Netflix to chop all up and cut out, and he couldn't because he'd given his word. So, as it happens, Do Not Resist went on and won first prize at the Tribeca Film Festival in New York. And the first prize is $20,000. And just as an aside, guess who had already volunteered to put up the prize money? Netflix. So he got the $20,000 prize, turned down Netflix because he couldn't give up control of his film, and used that money to get the film out there, which means he went all over the country to all these film festivals I'm always talking about, pushing his film, getting it seen. Netflix is, as I said, the powerhouse in streaming. They want control of everything. If they hear some young kid is there with some great, they want it. And of course they want to get it as cheaply as they can. Moving on, why do they do it? I think it's just greed. Netflix wants to make more money. And so they manipulate, particularly young filmmakers. And there are lots of them at these film festivals like Tribeca Film Festival in New York. They want to make more money. This is just a young guy. He is a cinematographer. He edits. He does sound. He does everything. He's worked on loads of documentaries. I think you'll hear about this in some of the clips that I'm showing you. He's back at work. He's making documentaries. Nobody's making piles of money. These are dedicated young people. And when you get a documentary like this, they're doing things they believe in. That's what he's doing today. I find these films, I hear about them, because I spend hours reading blogs. By this time, I know the blogs I want to read. I follow all the film festivals. There are certain critics I follow. Researching. And then you will hear or you'll read something. As I did about this, I thought, Now there's an interesting subject. How do I know whether it will be any good or not? Then I read about the sort of brouhaha at the Tribeca Film Festival, and I thought, that's one that I want to see. I want to also tell you that to get hold of these films, this one's been hard to get hold of. I don't know, but I think Netflix made it really hard for him. He finally got it released in theaters. He went to all the film festivals, as I've told you. And now, just recently, like last week, Netflix is now showing it. I mean, he never sold it to them. He is just basically giving them the rental of it. But now it appears on Netflix. But I want to give a really hurrah to public libraries. You can always get these films eventually in public libraries. When they first come out, it's discouraging. There'll be 40 or 50 people on the queue waiting for it. But public libraries do a tremendous service because they make sure that they get these films. So don't forget your public libraries. This film illustrates a total new way of thinking by the police. Unfortunately, it's an illustration of greed, the abuse of power. Let's let the filmmaker discuss with you, explain to you exactly what is going on. I think you're going to be shocked.
I think that, almost every scene that we filmed almost didn't happen because, we would gain access with departments that we had a great deal of respect for, and then there'd be another police-involved shooting, and the media would kick up about it, and they would pull their access because they thought it was, not a good choice for them to participate any longer. But, we kept promising all that we had to promise, which was an authentic portrayal of whatever we did together. I said, I'm not going to manipulate the footage and re-edit it. I really want to show you or reflect back whatever we do. And I think people are quite surprised with what they chose to show us. But when you're doing something 2-3 times a day, like a SWAT raid, I mean, to give you some context, my father was on SWAT for 13 years. He did 29 search warrants during that entire time.
29 raids, essentially.
29 raids, or SWAT call-outs, but most of those were either barricaded gunman situation or raids. You contrast that to a department of a similar size that we went out with while making this film. They're doing 200 a year, 3 to 4 times a day. So there's been a significant mission creep with...
Now, why do you think that is?
Well, I think that there's a lot of reasons, not the least of which is the financial mechanism by where the police actually get to keep this money that they go and seize from citizens. There's, a law in the books called civil asset forfeiture, where, if they can basically take your property, and the burden of proof is on you to determine that it was not used in a crime. And so that opens up for a tremendous amount of abuse, because how do you prove that some money wasn't used in a drug crime? You can't. And so, when you create a financial incentive to go out and to use this equipment, well, obviously that's what's going to happen. The idea of asset forfeiture is actually a sound one if you think about it. The idea originally was that you take money away from someone who's damaging your community, you put it into a general fund for the city, and then you use those funds to improve your community. That makes a lot of sense. However, there's been loopholes put in place, not the least of which have been the equitable sharing program from the federal government. And so the feds stepped in and said, hey, listen, if you include one federal task force agent on your SWAT team, guess what? You get to keep 80% of that money directly to your department, not going into a general fund for the city, and we get to keep 80%. So it's almost like they've created a kickback system. This is the first year, or not 2014 was the first year that more money was seized in asset forfeiture than American citizens was taken from them from actual criminal activity.
So more money in 2014 was actually seized by police officers than money was stolen from American citizens by criminals.
You got it.
That's crazy.
$5.1 billion was seized in 2014 through asset forfeiture. 3.5 was taken from American citizens from criminal activity.
I'll let you catch your breath after listening to that. I do want to remind you, if you didn't view the Brainy Talks class, please do, because these two go together. There's information there that is even more illuminating. So please view that as well. Thanks so much for joining me. Some of these things are upsetting. Some of these things make us angry. This is good. We have to know about these things. We have to think about them. Thanks again for joining me. See you.